I mean,
we have never had a black female president. I still have to pay taxes.
We've never had a
the whole
Jewish president.
concept is no taxation without. Well, we have had a white male president. We've had like 45 of them.
Whether Jews count as white or not has been sort of an object of debate for quite a while. We do. Okay.
You do.
So, I mean, it depends according to whom, and that's a pretty recent development. Okay, so.
Basically everyone. It's a religion.
Judaism
do you not agree that you were a white man?
I mean, I think that it depends on the context in which we're discussing it.
So what are you, Ben? Are you not a white guy?
I mean, I'm a man of Jewish ethnicity, which is sometimes grouped with white and sometimes not. I mean, that's the more accurate way to put it. But
I got an interesting video today for you guys, but before we go ahead and get into our video, hit that like button and that subscribe button. Whether you're Democratic or whether you're Republican, could you stand down against 25 others of the opposite party and defend your side? We have this video of Jubilee where we have one Republican, which is Ben Shapiro, and 25 Kamala Harris voters who are going to debate him on the Democratic side. Guys, do you ever find yourself just going back and forth with people about your party and their party and who's better to lead this country? This is the perfect video for you if you have, because we're gonna see how one Republican goes up against 25 Democrats. Let's go ahead and get into the video.
in this country right now, 300,000 minors. We have no idea where they are.
Oh, that is nonsense.
That is not nonsense.
No, it is. They are not lost. They're released to their sponsors who have to go through background checks. You have no idea what you're talking about.
They don't.
You think 300,000 minors are lost in America? Are you crazy?
I'm saying that. Why, hello there. I'm Ben Shapiro, and I'm co-founder of The Daily Wire and host of The Ben Shapiro Show. And today, I'm surrounded by 25 Kamala Harris supporters. My first claim is Kamala Harris's attempt to put DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion at the center of her policies is destructive. How's it going, dude?
Morning.
Where do I get one of those hats?
Oh, my boy made it for me.
Nice.
So, yeah, first of all, we're standing on stolen indigenous Tongva land, right? This is
Are you moving anytime soon?
land. No, but
Why?
the fact of the matter is I'm born and raised California. We're talking
Yeah, but
about
it's stolen land, so why don't you
diversity,
give it back?
equity, and vision. We should.
So why don't
We
you?
absolutely
You
should.
could do it today, right now.
Great. We
do it.
should, but that's not my point here. The point is you're saying that diversity, equity, inclusion is destructive.
Yes.
Right. So when we look at this country that is built off the backs of slavery and white supremacy, taking the lead, building the roots and foundations of everything that you know and believe today, it's ironic to see a Black and Indian woman who's rising up to the occasion against society, pushing them down. And this isn't just the fact that they're Black and Indian and a woman, it's the fact that
Can you give me an
those
example of how society
demographics-
pushed Kamala Harris down, please?
The demographic of people is what I'm talking about.
Well, yeah, but you suggested that Kamala Harris is being pushed down by society.
I'm not suggesting that, no.
I mean, that's
So
Okay,
my
boss.
point is saying
I'm
that
sorry, you've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
good to meet you. Whoa. Man.
Hey, Ben.
Hey, how's it going?
Nice to meet you. So my opening question to you would be, why is that a destructive thing? Why is that a bad thing when for a long time in this country, I feel personally that white men have had an advantage over some communities that have been discriminated against. So why would you say that that is a destructive thing and not, maybe making up for lost time?
Sure. So let me explain what I mean by diversity, equity, and inclusion. So the basic theory of diversity, equity, and inclusion is spelled out by people like Richard Delgado, who's sort of one of the founders of, for example, critical race theory, is that essentially disparities equal discrimination. That if you see any disparity between one group in the United States and another group in the United States, that is the result of some exterior discrimination. It is not the result of individuals within that group acting differently. It's not the result of cultural differences. It's not the result of aggregated differences within individuals within that group. And that to me is a failure of logic. It also is destructive in that it separates group from group, particularly in the United States, on the basis of race, which is not the best way of actually bringing Americans together or forming policy that is the best for all Americans.
Do you think there's room for nuance, perhaps, though? Like, yeah, maybe not everybody, but there certainly has been a large sect of people that has had it harder because of the color of their skin or their sexuality or their gender identity. Could you acknowledge that maybe there's, you know, a middle ground there where it's not all, but there is some people who certainly have had a disadvantage?
I will say that history has consequences, obviously, and that if you are talking about historic marginalization of particular groups, that has consequences. The problem is that when you design policy in order to rectify for cosmic injustices or historic injustices, you actually have to try and measure out whether underperformance, say economically, is due to those historic injustices. If so, how much? What is the corrective policy that is actually aimed at achieving best opportunity for all? The diversity, equity, inclusion policies that are directed at separating race from race and then benefiting one race, for example, at the expense of another, ignore the fact that there are individuals within those groups, that history does not fall on everybody equivalent, that frankly, genetics and intelligence don't necessarily fall on an individual level, right? You and I, we don't look the same. We might have different heights. We might have different qualities. You know, that is just the way that you know, God or nature has bestowed skill sets on everybody. What exactly is the government supposed to correct for? And if you took this entire group and you separate it in half, just draw a line anywhere. It's a circle, right? Anywhere you draw a line, you're going to get disparities between the two groups on either side of the line without regard to race, without regard to sex, and without regard to, for example, sexual orientation.
But does that mean that that hasn't played an effect in that story at all?
I'm not going to, no, you'd be a fool to claim that, that, again, past injustices have no effect on what's happened today. Thanks so much. Watching guys gear up to...
I would say, guys, when it comes to historical injustice, yes, we have had historical injustice, but also in the 50s, our grandparents, they had multiple successful businesses. They were doing very, very well at one point, regardless of the historical injustice that was done to our people. Nobody is saying that it doesn't exist. Nobody is saying that it never existed. What we're saying is that you have to just go ahead and move forward. It is what it is. It happened, and it is what it is. It is what it is. Like, you can't live your life in the future based on what happened in the past. Nobody can do that. You'll be a very miserable person moving through life. You'll have that professional victim mentality, and then you won't see yourself as successful, and it'll be very hard for you to become successful. And even when you do become successful, you're gonna still on the inside, internally, feel like you're not worth the same value of somebody else because of the historical injustice that happened. But at the end of the day, if my upbringing was terrible, there are so many other things I can focus on than just me being Black in America, but my upbringing wasn't the best, right? And I was at a point where I blamed my upbringing for every single thing that went wrong in my life. But you can never move forward if you don't stop blaming your upbringing and your past. If you don't stop blaming those for your future choices. Your future, does it play a part? Yes. But it gets even worse when you put the blame on other things instead of yourself, because then you won't actually change yourself if you don't recognize and take accountability and go forth and do better.
Really entertaining.
So yeah, it happened, but it's over.
That was so nice, everybody. Thank you.
So you believe that certain economic disparities between racial groups are caused as a result of cultural differences?
Sure.
And so what is the backing on this? What would you say contributes to your belief in that?
Okay, so not all cultures, for example, value studying in school the same. You can check this by the amount of hours that kids of particular cultures study. So, for example, Korean Americans study a lot more than, for example, Latino Americans in terms of the number of hours that kids study. It would be hard to suggest what to attribute that to other than sort of parental guidance and what exactly the priorities are of the parents. This is true, by the way, between white people. Okay, so when I talk about disparities between groups, you can talk about white Appalachia, and there are very different values with regard to studying than there are for, say, upper-class white Americans who are living in Brooklyn, right? That's not the exact same thing. So cultural differences are not just racial differences. I think that anybody who attempts to sort of clumsily map that on and pretend that that's all the same, that's obviously not true. But cultural differences do explain an enormous amount of group disparities across incomes, to take a perfect example, if you look at single motherhood rates, they're not equivalent across groups. Those are going to have massive differences with regard to outcomes for children. So if you're talking about cultural differences, again, cultural is just it was a rough way of saying how people act within a group on a large scale. And that is going to amount to some generalization, but that generalization is going to tend to, shall we say, concur. It's going to correlate very highly with outcome.
But culture is acclimated over time. It becomes a thing over time. And so do you not think that these historical disadvantages that certain ethnic groups have been through over time has created this culture where in which they're unable to put themselves ahead? You do say that Asian Americans are more likely to study, yes, but we have to take into account that after the Chinese Exclusion Act, Asian Americans were given a certain type of reparations which allowed them into the country. And in order for them, they were given visas, which allowed them to come into the, yes, they were given easier processes into visas, yes, which allowed them into, no, it's a form of reparations, which they were once excluded from coming in. And so giving them an easier opportunity to attain these visas allowed them into the US. And mainly the individuals who were able to attain those were people with higher educations, which is why it may seem that Asian Americans within the country who come in typically with higher incomes as well as higher education.
Guys, I think she lost her point a long time ago. I don't even think she remembers what her point is in anymore. But I get what Ben Shapiro is saying. If I'm not mistaken, definitely put it in the comments if you think that you kind of understood what he was saying or not. Even if you don't agree with what he was saying, put it in the comments. But it seems as if he's basically saying that a certain demographic of people, the disadvantage is not necessarily because it's systematic, as currently right now, education-wise. He's saying that certain demographic of people maybe value studying or value and push upon their children or push upon within their community to, I don't want to say glorify, but basically push, promote, and glorify studying. Other cultures do not. So, like, for an example, what I think he's trying to say without saying it is that, like, he may feel that in the Black culture or in the Black community, and not just the Black community, but in the Black community, that we don't glorify enough studying or education or getting straight A's in school or getting straight B's in school. There is a high number of Black individuals that do that. Their parents are very focused on their education and where they're going to go in college and saving up for colleges and different things like that. However, there are a plethora of my people that just don't value studying. They put off studying. And don't get me wrong, it's in a lot of cultures too, but just culturalizing generally, as Black people, and growing up obviously in an all Black community, a lot of us wasn't valuing studying. We were valuing sports. We were valuing acting. We were valuing singing, dancing, things that were glamorous and in the spotlight, and fame and fortune. We never glamorized or truly promoted education. And sometimes I can remember growing up that a lot of the guys that I would see would get talked about for being nerds or being very involved and valuing their education. They would be getting called like simps, or they would be getting called punks, or they would just get talked about for being smart and educated and caring about their grades and their education. And I watch these guys get bullied. I watch these guys get talked about by other guys who wanted to be basketball players and football players and wanted to get the most girls and different things like that. So what he's trying to say is culturally, certain people focus is not education, and they don't value education in certain cultures, starting with the house, with the household, as much as they do in an Asian culture. Everybody knows in an Asian culture, and then my other friend who is Ghana, or from Ghana, excuse me guys if I said that wrong, but she also said the same thing. They value education very, very much in her culture. As well as my Asian friend. I used to have an Asian friend named Sawana when we were younger in kindergarten. She was super smart, but her parents valued her education. She was way above her grade level, so much so to the point where they asked for her to be pushed and bumped up, but they didn't want to do it. But education was valued in their cultures. So it has nothing necessarily to do with being black. So I get what he's saying. He's just saying in specific cultures and where you see certain people, education may not be the main priority. It may be like, oh, I'm going to put you on the football team or the basketball team, or you're going to be a rapper, or you're going to be this, or you're going to be that. Like, they glorify other things more than they would glorify education. Then that's what will make these disadvantages that they talking about. He's basically saying that they're not necessarily real disadvantages, but they're disadvantages that people invoke on themselves by their parenting style, by what's promoted in the community, and what's pushed upon the people. And what she's probably saying is a lack of advantages within the system. So yeah, what y'all think?
Backgrounds, it may come off as that they are more studious than Latino Americans. But what we have to take into account is that Latin America and Hispanic people have faced a lot of tremendous setback due to historical atrocities. It's not their culture per se. What you see within...
Is there any individual agency in here, or is it all historic circumstance?
Everything is based off of history. Everything acclimates. Everything is an accumulation of history.
So to take the single motherhood example, for example...
The way...
That was fun anyway.
She seems sweet.
Whoa. Hey, how's it going? How are you? Good to meet you.
So your basis is saying that culturally, people don't have the same advantages, right?
I'm saying that not every culture sort of initiates the same action within groups.
So in part, you're saying that you're part of each culture. You know what goes on in each culture to say these things.
No, I'm saying that I can analyze the activities of a particular group with reference to their actual behavior.
So if you go into my culture, we're told that we can achieve anything through hard work. We have to work 10 times harder. But you're not part of our culture, so you're explaining something that doesn't have to do with you. But in turn, you're saying that that culture, unfortunately, does not value the same thing that the next culture does.
So revealed preference tends to be a better way of doing social science than subjective perception. So revealed preference is how people act in the world. So for example, if you have one group of people who say, we really, really value our kids studying, and then their kids don't study at all, that would be a revealed preference.
Okay.
Everybody has
so
has
then
a
when you
reason
have
to say their
people
kids study.
who say in corporate America, you have people who value nepotism versus actual studying hard. What is that called then?
Okay, so the idea that people generally value nepotism over studying hard, I'd like to see the evidence of that, given the fact the vast majority of wealth in this country is not created through nepotism or through inherited wealth.
But Donald Trump was given nepotism, was he not?
I mean, he's one example among a bajillion people who are very, very wealthy in this country. I'm very wealthy now. I certainly wasn't born very wealthy.
But then you can't speak on Donald Trump's experience, can you not?
That just happens to be the case. Okay, I mean, you can laugh at my particular history, but I grew up in an 1,100 square foot home in Burbank, California, with 4 siblings in 1 bedroom.
In Burbank, hold on. In Burbank, I'm sorry, but in Burbank versus growing up in South Central, being told that you have to excel 10 times harder than the next person, but then you're not part of the culture, to say that you can actually come to these disparities is kind of far-sighted.
The idea that you have to work 10 times harder coming from South Central based on, for example, test scores is obviously not true. We've had affirmative action programs in this country for solidly 40 years.
But now affirmative action is gone. It's out the door.
Thank
now
God,
DEI is present. DEI is actually saying that we need to have diversity, equity, inclusion. So you're actually putting a footing in the door for different races, different genders, different women, different men, everything. So now you're saying that because this program is gone, this one isn't.
Sorry, you've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
I don't know where that one was going.
But yeah, like a jackrabbit. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that.
Hi,
how's it going? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. So, I kind of want to shift the conversation about DEI a little bit away from culture, because I don't know if that's necessarily like a helpful conversation to have. And I really want to talk more about representation. So 1 in 5 Americans currently is Hispanic. This country, like it or not, is not a homogenous country. We are a very diverse country. Do you not think that our legislators should be representative of the overall population?
I don't see a way that you can have a quote unquote representative legislature with 435 members of Congress in a country of 340 million people, because you can divvy that up however you want. It's not by race. You could do it by sex. You could do it by gender. You could do it by sexual orientation. How exactly do you decide what is quote unquote the representative group? And also, I don't believe that individuals ought to be represented based on group identity. So, for example, I'm Jewish. Jews are actually overrepresented in Congress. I don't think that we ought to decide exactly how many people in Congress are Jewish based on the Jewish population of the country. I think that's actually a pretty silly way to do representation.
Well, we don't have to do it systematically, but fundamentally, there is an issue with the fact that we are not fully represented. Like, the entire population is not represented.
I mean,
we have
that's not
never
true.
had a black female president. I still have to pay taxes.
We've never had a
the
Jewish
whole
president. Who
concept is
cares?
no taxation without. Well, we have had a white male president. We've had like 45 of them.
Whether Jews count as white or not has been sort of an object of debate for quite a while. We do. Okay.
You do.
So, I mean, it depends according to whom, and that's a pretty recent development. Okay, so
Basically, everyone. It's a religion.
Judaism.
Do
is
you
also
not
ethnicity.
agree that you were a white man?
I mean, I think that it depends on the context in which we're discussing it.
So what are you, Ben? Are you not a white guy?
I mean, I'm a man of Jewish ethnicity, which is sometimes grouped with white and sometimes not. I mean, that's the more accurate way to put it. But when
What
we're
else would
talking
you be
about
grouped with?
with Jews, who are which is an ethnicity. I mean,
So
yeah.
you're not white at all.
I mean, again, it depends who's doing the grouping and how. I've seen Jews grouped with white and Jews grouped with not white. Are we just pretending that doesn't exist? That's a reality. However, as far as your generalized point, which is that we are supposed to identify people by group identity, that if we don't have a black female president.
Okay, so she's talking about the representation of more people. She doesn't see that enough, especially in Congress or in any other political positions or any other leadership. She's just saying that it's there, but it's not enough. But regardless of the situation, you can't. It's so crazy because they always say that Republicans focus on race, but really, truly, they focus on race. The Democrats focus on race heavy, and I mean heavy, guys, because at the end of the day, even though there's not a lot of representation of what you look like, that shouldn't stop you from being the best that you can be. Does representation matter? Absolutely. It does. To some people, yes, it does. They may want to be the next so-and-so if they see a person that looks like them. Of course. There is more, they can relate a little bit more to that. But should we just be voting for people because of their color? Like, I'm not about to vote for Kamala just because she's quote-unquote black. I'm not doing that. Just like I'm not about to vote for somebody that's white because they quote unquote white or because they Mexicans. And I used to love me some Mexicans growing up. Let me tell you, okay? You could not tell me anything bad about a Mexican because I love them very much. But am I going to vote for somebody just because they're Mexican? No. So we shouldn't just be voting for Kamala because we want black representation. We had Obama. So they always say that Republicans is focused on race, but Democrats are always focused on race too as well. And I know because before I got saved, I used to be so race driven about the things that I went through because I was dark skinned or because I was black. And I have been through some things. That's why I said they're not wrong in what they're saying. But it's not the deciding factor on who we choose to be our president or who we choose to be in leadership or how we should make decisions based on our color of our skin. Because if you're black and you just don't know nothing about nothing, I'm not choosing you. If you're white and you just don't know nothing about nothing, I'm not choosing you. If you're Jewish and Jewish or Spanish or Native American and you don't know nothing about nothing, I'm not choosing you to be my president. I don't care. It's not, you know what I'm saying? So emotionally, does it do something for you to see more representation of yourself? Yes, I do agree with that. But do I think that there's a systematic issue that is like stopping that? No, I just think that people like to choose who they feel is the best for the position. And if they are more relatable to a white person, then that's just who they're going to choose. If they're not, then that's not. If they're more relatable to a black person, that's who they're going to choose. what Republicans are saying is just focus on the credentials. Republicans is really just trying to say focus on the credentials. So even if they're black and they have really good credentials, and then there's a white person who has really good credentials, it should never come down to should we pick this person because they're black or should we pick this person because they're white. You can say that they're gonna pick the white person, but we don't necessarily know that. They may just pick the black person or the Mexican person or the Indian person or the Asian person or whatever. It's just that the more black people continue to value education, then we will have more black representation. I do believe that. Now, how far up they can go, that's another conversation.
Somehow, black females have not been represented. So Barack Obama was in no way representative of black females because he's not a female.
No,
he
was representative,
so
but
he was
that's
half
the point.
representative. How do you do the math on this? And why?
You shouldn't do the math on it completely statistically, but the fact
You shouldn't
is
do the math on it at all. You should treat
clearly
people as individuals.
underrepresented.
You should treat people as individuals.
Well, if you don't even want Kamala Harris to attempt to create DEI initiatives in office, then there isn't even going to be a conversation about it.
I mean, I don't think there ought to be a conversation about why we ought to be represented by race or by sex. I think that we are each individual people with individual ideas, and if that person represents my ideas, I don't care what sex, race, or sexual orientation they are.
I mean, to an extent, yes.
No,
but
entirely.
there is an issue with the lack of empathy in office. We need to be able to empathize and legislate for the people that are living in this country.
I was not
Do you
aware,
not believe that?
I was not aware that empathy is relegated to particular race solidarity.
No, but I mean, it's easier to be empathetic towards people whose experiences you can fundamentally understand based on your identity. Like, do you not?
All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and leave it there because I don't want the video to be too long. You can definitely go ahead and watch this video on your own time. But what do you guys think? Put it in the comments. Do you really truly believe that there is a systematic issue with not having more representation? Do you think it's a cultural issue? Or do you guys even think that there is a true issue at all? And if we all just focus on being the best that we can be and being as successful as possible and focusing on God and focusing on our faith and staying within the order of God and just valuing education more, do you think that there will be more representation of all different people in leadership and in office? Because I mean, how many black people ran for president? How many? I don't know that. Maybe you guys can do the statistics or put it in the comments how many black people out of the lifetime have tried to run for president once black people were able to get, their rights. But we definitely cannot be angry about the past and just be like, okay, reparations. And okay, well, once we get those reparations, then what we're gonna do? I feel like we're just gonna keep asking for more, right? And never actually try to solve the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is just, number one, faith in God is the root, is the number one root. Because once you have your identity in Christ, you have so much more clarity. Number two, starting to understand what's of value. What are you doing in society that's contributing to society, right? And how much do you value your education? And it doesn't even have to be education in college, but also education in other areas too as well. But like as a community, let's be honest, a lot of people in my culture don't value education. Maybe now they do, but back then when I was growing up, they didn't value education as much. I know in the 50s they did value education. Like my grandmother, she learned Spanish, she went to college. My mom, she graduated with her degree. My uncle has his degree. And my grandpa, if I'm not mistaken, had his degree. So, back then, black people definitely value education. But, I mean, something shifted. And now most of us desire to be basketball players, football players, rappers, singers, and everything else our culture represents in the media on what it means to be black, which is twerking and stripping and 6 figures and 8 figures and a whole bunch of propaganda. So what do you guys think? Do you guys think it's a systematic issue, Or do you guys just believe that they have a victim mentality and our history happened? It is what it is. If our ancestors, if our grandparents can do it and thrive and be successful, then we can also do it and thrive and be successful. The more of us do it, the more we'll see ourselves in these areas as doctors, as lawyers, as world leaders. And what you guys think? Put in the comments. Healthy debate. Nice and clean debate. If you disagree, put it in the comments. No worries. We're not here to all sound like robots. We definitely have different opinions, different hearts, different desires. But definitely put it in the comments, and I will see you guys in my next video. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, that like button, and the notification bell to get updates when I post my next video. I will see you guys. Stay blessed. Bye.